welcome to a little review to just collect my thoughts after playing through the game, at least as Kali. I am also going to play through it as Patrick, or Parik, but firstly, just to reflect a little bit on what my impression is already and how I feel about it, and maybe that will help you to understand whether you want to perhaps, instead of joining me with playing through Parik, maybe pick it up yourself and play through it yourself, or just in general, what do you think about these games based on my impression? So, firstly, I have to mention that, of course, with these types of games, there will be, for many people who are reviewing them, complaints that they are visual novels, and that visual novels perhaps are not games, and that's a common theme, but I don't share that sentiment. I think visual novels are a mixture of games and books, essentially. They are linear for the most part, but they do usually include some sort of interactivity, mechanics that allow you to influence things and change the story to some degree. But more than anything else, I think they are linear. So the deviations that you can make from the main story are usually not that big, or they branch off, but then once again join together to a common ending, or maybe it offers 2 or 3 different endings, but maybe the decision points are not so monumental. So I feel like that's kind of the expectation that you have to go into it. If you're complaining that this book, this game is a visual novel, then I think you missed the point. There's different games that are not visual novels. It's like picking up an RPG and then complaining that it's an RPG. You have to understand that it is a visual novel, and if you're into that, if you're willing to go with that, then you have to judge it on that basis, not judge it for what it isn't. It's not Bloodlines 2, it's a visual novel. And I think for that, it's firstly okay to be linear. I think in the particular case of this game, I think it's very linear, I would say. I never felt at any point that there's a choice where I can play the character differently than I played it. Because essentially I can't play like an evil Kali and a good Kali. Because the story is way too structured and way too linear for that. So it doesn't really allow me that kind of choice or something like that. It doesn't really allow me even a moral choice in the end, I guess. At least not to a degree that I think it's meaningful. For this reason, I feel like it's on the lower scale of interactivity. And when it comes to mechanics, I don't know how the mechanics work in this game. I am almost certainly convinced that they're completely bugged in the Switch version because they didn't work at all. Because from what I understood, the blood mechanic, it always showed me 2 lines, and I think those are unfilled. Because I looked at some other people's videos when they played on the PC version maybe, and they were getting red, and mine were just always blank. So I felt they are completely bugged and they didn't work at all. And the same with the hunters. I think I read that when you do too much hunter stuff, that you can get a bad ending because of that. And I don't even know where I could make a lot more hunter stuff or less hunter stuff than I did, because it was kind of predetermined by the game for the most part. I think there was one scene where Parik was dealing with the hunters and I couldn't intervene because I didn't have the disciplines or something. But more or less it was pretty given how much disciplines I can use. So I didn't understand that mechanic that much from the beginning, but I think also it was completely bugged because it was never triggered for my game. So mechanically, I think this game is very weak, but also it could be that my version is just completely bugged. Then the next thing, when you're looking at a visual novel, part of it is of course the text and the story. I will come to that in just a second. But the second part is of course the art. And a lot of people don't like the art when you look at other people's reviews. I honestly don't share that sentiment that much. I think the art is fine. I think it's fine. I don't mind it at all. It looks good enough for me, because I'm not that visually minded when I'm reading a book. I don't even look at it to that degree of detail. Of course, it would be nice if they had more expressions when they're speaking, or different clothing in some situations or something, but it's fine, the art style. I felt almost as if kind of the art and the story were created a little bit separately, because Kali is very much sporting this Walkman, And I feel like that's like a statement piece for a character like this. If you have this type of character that's wearing literally a Walkman here and has the headphones attached to it, like it's an absolute statement piece. Like she's into that. Like for some reason she's retro. She likes that. I'm kind of reminded of like the Guardian of the Galaxy movie where the Walkman in the beginning is like a statement piece for the character. But it didn't really come up like that much. Kind of, in fact, like at some points she even made like more fun about Perek's use of cassette tapes in his car, when that should have been like a huge bonding moment, maybe about how cool the technology is or like how retro it is or something. And it just didn't come up. Like I felt like maybe the art was created as an after effect of the story, and then they just wrote this Walkman back into the writing because it was kind of already in the art. It's a bit weird, I say. And then when it comes to the story, I think overall I have to say the story writing wise, for me it's good. I would not complain about it much. I felt engaged by the story. I wanted to play it. There was no forcing me to play it. I really wanted to know what's happening next. The characters are engaging. I'm curious about what's happening. Of course, you can always look at the story like with a magnifying glass and look at some details and then complain about them, because some coincidences in the story are a bit crazy. Like when you're running away from the Elysium and you're meeting like random people on the way, like not only one time but like 2 or 3 times you're meeting like people on the way when you're running from the Elysium. That's a bit crazy. I also felt like some choices seem to be like as if they're mutually exclusive in the game. I could only look at this or only look at that, but in reality, like there was nothing there. That why should I not be able to look at everything, kind of. So the writing there is a little bit weak. That I have to make some choices where the choice felt like very arbitrary. Or also like the craziest one was when we met Skylar at the stash. A few days later, after we gave her the address, like what a coincidence that she's just there. And I mean, I understand from the point of view, like you want to make the story dense. Like it would be really boring if I went to the stash and it just was empty because Skylar cleaned it out earlier. But that's kind of realistic. And then why do you even offer me to go to the stash? Like you kind of give me an odd choice and then you kind of make it work because I was allowed to have this odd choice and I made it. But why not offer me that odd choice? Why don't you have a second stash or like something else? I don't know. Or why didn't I like, I don't know. I'm just feeling like some things are coincidental, and I don't think I want to go into that level of detail. I think the overall arcing story of the New York by Night's kind of chronicle trilogy, as well as this specific chapter within it, I think it's engaging. I liked it. And I find that from a perspective of, I wouldn't say it's the best. Like, there are absolutely better vampire things. There's, I don't know, Anne Rice you can read. If you look at movies, there's movies like Only Lovers Left Alive. There's absolutely amazing vampire stuff out there, but we also have to be realistic. And I'm a guy who's super into vampire stuff. I've read and watched a lot of stuff, and we have to be realistic. A lot of stuff is awful, really awful, terrible. Now, if you are into like romance or like teeny drama stuff, no offense, but like that's fine. But for me, it's not. Then of course maybe you have a different judgment. But for me, most of the content of vampire drama stuff is just that, like high school girls and stuff like that. And it's not the type of content I want to have for vampires. That's more like kind of like, yeah, maybe you watch it as a guilty pleasure. But for me, it's not really that meaningful. I like vampires more in a more serious matter, in a manner that is more adult themed. And I think with World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade, I get that usually, and I got it here as well. So I think on that level, I'm fine with it. It's an engaging content. I liked the story. I liked some of the characters. I liked some of the surprises in the stories. That's always like very engaging. So I think from a story perspective, I'm fine to good is my judgment. When it comes to replayability, of course, with a visual novel, it's hard to get it to be replayable, because obviously you know the story now, you know the surprises now. What is there left to discover? And in the previous games, they locked some content behind some choices. So if you wanted to replay it, you could pick the other choice the next time you play it. But everything in the middle between making that choice, like where the story branches off into two, you're just needlessly replaying because there's no change in that. You cannot even change literally anything. You're just reading the same book basically until you can decide between the two different branches again. And that's not very engaging, I guess, from a player perspective. So I think replayability is pretty poor usually on these games, and I think here it's no exception. I think I'm very curious if when I'm playing as Patrick, if I'm allowed to pick the other options. So instead of going to Kaiser, will I be able to play Hope chapter? And instead of going to Sinceric, can I go to Ristra? What was her name? Is that possible? Because that would be at least something. Then I would be willing to replay it. I think I'm also excited about playing as Parik is that you get some additional scenes in general and that maybe a different perspective on some scenes. So I think it's going to be interesting how well they pull that off. But I think that's replaying it 2 times, basically. I think after that, I would not play this game again for at least a few years because I would probably need to forget at least some basic details about it until I'm interested in doing it again. Because it's basically a book. And to be honest, I think there's like 1 or 2 books in my life that I wanted to reread and did reread. And I think the most I've ever read one book is maybe 3 times. Because I have a huge amount of books that I could or want to read. And I just don't have time to reread stuff. There's too much new stuff out there. So from that perspective, I think replayability is probably poor. And then the last point I have to bring up is the bugs. Like this game, in my view, has too many issues with bugs. Like they are not gonna detract. Like they didn't detract from my enjoyment. Like in the way that I couldn't enjoy it, and they didn't prevent me from playing it. And I could work around them because I kind of guessed some workarounds, like restarting it. But it's like there are obvious bugs and obvious issues. For example, like the mechanics of the game with the Bloods and Hunters, at least on the Switch version, they don't work at all. That sometimes you end the night and it just restarts the previous night. Like to me, it's an insult to have a game that is so bad on the QA being sold for 20 euros. Like I don't get it. Like there should be like somebody playing it through at least once. And these very, very obvious things, they should be caught. And that's not even to mention that there are some questionable logical statements where you kind of read the text and you're not really sure what it's referring to and you have to make a choice. And I have to guess what the choice is about. Or that there's some spelling or grammar mistakes. Those are like harder to catch, but I think like the very obvious ones that they didn't catch them before release, I think is very embarrassing to them, probably. Or should be. So in summary, at this point of the game, we haven't played the second part of it, basically, but which I assume will be similar to the first one, so probably it will have the same kind of issues. Would I recommend it at this point? I think probably, actually, I would maybe recommend it if you are, of course, into vampire stuff. Because, as I said, it's good content, and if you're into vampire stuff, you're probably lacking good content, because a lot of stuff is not good content, and I think this is good enough that you will enjoy it. Especially if you like the whole trilogy, but I would definitely say don't pick it up for 20 euros now. Just pick it up when they're all bundled together in a big discount and you can buy it off like good old games for like 5 euros or 10 euros or on a Steam sale. At that point, like the whole bundle of it is worth it and it's worth playing through it and it's fun and you will enjoy it. I would give it a total rating, probably like 6 out of 10, something like that at this point. I haven't played the second part, as I said. Could be significantly worse, I hope not. It could be significantly better. I don't think so, probably. So I think a 6 out of 10 somewhere in that range is probably a fair statement at this point, so long as there's no game-breaking bugs that still come up. But I think this is really a little bit sad because I think this game had a little bit more potential. If the mechanics actually worked, maybe I would have enjoyed it more. If some choices were a little bit more meaningful, maybe I would enjoy it more. But it is what it is, and I think it's, as I said, a good game. And if you're into vampire themed games, then hey, check it out, because it's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's pretty fine. So thanks for sticking with me. I hope you will also join me on the second chapter of playing Parak. So see you then tomorrow probably. Take care. Bye bye.